There's an AI model out there right now that can go toe-to-toe with the biggest names in the industry, and there's a good chance you've never even heard its name. While everyone's talking about the same 2 or 3 companies over and over, a handful of smaller labs have quietly built AI systems that rival, and in some cases beat, the giants everyone assumes are untouchable. And almost nobody's paying attention. Here's why that matters more than you think, and by the end of this, you're going to look at the AI landscape completely differently. We tend to think of AI as this 2-horse race. A couple of massive companies with nearly unlimited money and headlines. But behind the scenes, there's an entire ecosystem of smaller research labs, some backed by governments, some by universities, some by tiny startups with a fraction of the funding, that are producing genuinely competitive AI models. And a lot of them are doing it with a fraction of the resources the big players have access to. If you're into stories about the parts of tech that don't get enough attention, hit that follow button now, because this channel is built around exactly that. Let's talk about why this even happens in the first place. Building a frontier AI model used to require an almost absurd amount of money. Massive computing clusters, huge teams of researchers, and access to enormous amounts of training data. That combination naturally favored a small handful of companies with deep enough pockets to compete. But over the past couple of years, something shifted. Techniques for training AI models became more efficient. Smaller teams figured out clever ways to get more performance out of less computing power. And open research, papers, code, and methods being shared publicly, meant that breakthroughs from one lab could be studied and improved on by a much smaller team somewhere else in the world. That's exactly how you end up with labs most people have never heard of producing models that hold their own against systems built by companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Take smaller labs based outside the usual tech hubs everyone assumes dominate AI. Research groups in France, labs in Canada, teams in parts of Asia that aren't the household names you'd expect, have released models that outperform expectations given their size and funding. Some of these teams are a fraction of the size of the research divisions at the giant companies, sometimes just a few dozen researchers, working with a sliver of the compute budget, and still producing models that score competitively on independent benchmarks against systems built by teams 100 times larger. How is that even possible? A big part of it comes down to something called efficient training. Instead of just throwing more computing power and more data at a model and hoping it gets smarter, which is genuinely how a lot of the biggest models were built, some of these smaller labs have focused heavily on the quality of their training data, and clever architectural tweaks that squeeze more capability out of the same amount of compute. It's the difference between brute force and precision. And it turns out precision can get you remarkably far. There's also something happening with open weight models that doesn't get talked about enough. A number of these lesser-known labs release their models publicly, meaning anyone can download the actual model and run it themselves, inspect how it works, and build on top of it. That openness creates this snowball effect. Developers around the world start testing it, finding its strengths, improving on it, fine-tuning it for specific tasks, and suddenly a model that started in a small lab with limited resources ends up powering products and tools used by millions of people, most of whom have no idea what's actually running under the hood. Curious which of these you've actually used without realizing it? Drop a comment with what AI tools you use daily. I bet at least one of you is running something built by a team you've genuinely never heard of. Here's something that really puts this in perspective. Independent benchmark leaderboards, the places where AI researchers test models head-to-head on things like reasoning, coding, and general knowledge, regularly show smaller, lesser-known models sitting right alongside, and sometimes ahead of, models built by companies with household name recognition. If you only pay attention to headlines and press releases, you'd have no idea this is happening, because these smaller labs don't have the same marketing budgets or media relationships. They're not doing flashy product launches with celebrity endorsements. They're just quietly publishing research papers and dropping models onto open platforms, letting the actual performance speak for itself. That's honestly part of why so few people know about them. The biggest AI companies spend enormous amounts on marketing and PR, which naturally means their names dominate the conversation, regardless of whether their models are actually the best performing option for a given task. Meanwhile, some of the most technically impressive work is happening in research labs that would rather publish a paper than throw a launch event. If this is the kind of thing you find genuinely interesting, hit that subscribe button, because I dig into stuff like this all the time. The parts of the AI world that don't get the spotlight but honestly deserve it just as much. Let's talk about why this actually matters beyond just being an interesting fact. When AI development isn't concentrated in the hands of just 2 or 3 massive companies, that's actually a really healthy thing for how this technology develops. Competition from smaller, leaner labs pushes the bigger companies to keep innovating instead of coasting on brand recognition. It also means the benefits of AI development don't stay locked up inside a handful of corporate walls. Open models built by smaller teams get used by researchers, students, and independent developers all over the world who could never afford access to the closed, proprietary systems built by the giants. There's also a national angle to this that's worth mentioning. A number of governments have started actively funding domestic AI research specifically so they're not entirely dependent on a small handful of foreign companies for critical AI infrastructure. That's led to some genuinely impressive models coming out of places that don't usually get associated with cutting-edge AI research. It's not just Silicon Valley anymore. It's research labs scattered across the globe, each one contributing pieces to a much bigger, much more distributed picture than most people realize. Here's a thought experiment for you. If you had to guess, right now, how many genuinely capable AI labs do you think exist worldwide? Most people would guess somewhere between 5 and 10. The real number of labs producing competitive, benchmark-worthy models is significantly higher than that. And it keeps growing every single year as the tools and techniques for building these systems become more accessible. That accessibility is honestly the whole story here. A few years ago, building a competitive AI model required resources that only a handful of companies on the planet could realistically access. Now, thanks to more efficient training methods and a genuinely collaborative open research culture, small teams with modest budgets can build something that punches dramatically above its weight class. And that's not slowing down. If anything, the gap between what a giant, well-funded lab can build and what a small, scrappy team can build keeps shrinking every year. So next time you hear people talking about AI like it's a 2-company race, remember that's really only the surface-level story. Underneath that, there's an entire world of researchers, smaller labs, and independent teams building genuinely impressive systems. And most of them are doing it without the spotlight, without the massive marketing budgets, and often without most people ever learning their names. Comment below and let me know, before this video, had you heard of any AI labs outside the usual big names everyone talks about? I'm genuinely curious how much of this was new information for you. And if you want to keep discovering the parts of the tech world that fly under the radar but genuinely matter, make sure you're following this channel. I'm always digging into the stories and the players that don't get nearly enough attention, but honestly should. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.